Who doesn't love that? Who doesn't love having a mirror 6 inches in front of their face at all times, right? Great. Well, let's get started, everybody. I'm excited to do this too. Let's take it away. So yeah, welcome everybody to our day of TV talk. Between coronavirus and the movement and the election year, it's easy to feel like spending a day talking about television is frivolous. Let me assure you that it is not. The work that we are doing in the streets and reform policy is more important right now, but make no mistake, television will play a crucial role in the reshaping of our world. Also, Kate, are we recording? Great, perfect.
We are
Thank you. I'm
recording.
going to record as well. I'm going to start over, everybody. Let's start over again. You'll get to hear the same words again. Welcome, everybody, to our day of TV talk. Between coronavirus and the movement and the election year, it's easy to feel like spending a day talking about TV is frivolous. Let me assure you that it is not. The work that we are doing in the streets and reform policy is more important right now. But make no mistake, television will play a crucial role in the reshaping of our world, because no medium across any art form is better at telling people stories than television. We explore the minutiae of human existence, highlighting what is the same about all of us, as well as what makes us uniquely ourselves. So when you are told to educate yourself as a tool of the resistance, this can be part of that too. Learn to tell the human stories of people like you, people who look like you, or talk like you, or feel like you, or love like you, or laugh like you, or suffer like you. Represent for the real ones, whoever they may be. My point is that this does not have to be separate from the important societal work that we're doing, but that also doesn't mean that you have to write the story of the movement just because of your skin tone. All we need from you is just your perspective on the world that we all know. That's why I'm always a little bit baffled when someone tells me that they don't have any original ideas. This is television. Who cares about original ideas? Here, I want to show you what I mean. Kate, could we go ahead and open up that Name the Show PDF, please?
You got it.
Name the show. Thank you. Name that show, we call it. Okay. So here we go. If you could scroll up just a tiny bit.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get that chat open. Make sure everybody can participate in the chat.
This is all the way scrolled up.
Is it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, that's good enough. Okay, what show is this? Read this. Name that show. A smart but struggling young man moves to Atlanta to become talent manager for his cousin, a newly famous rapper, and his crew. Yep. This one's not too difficult, right? It's got the name right there in the title. Atlanta. That's Atlanta. This is obviously the log line for Atlanta. Scroll down one more time, Kate, if you wouldn't mind, to the next page. Atlanta. A smart but struggling young man moves to Atlanta to become talent manager for his cousin, a newly famous rapper, and his crew. It's a very original show. Atlanta is not the most original log line. A pretty simple log line allows Donald Glover to imbue his story with a lot of self. Right? Already not super original. But let's take it one step further. Let's scroll down one more time. Let's scroll down to the next page, please, Kate. So now what we're going to do is we're going to remove a few of those words. A smart but struggling man moves to blank to become talent manager for his blank, a newly famous blank, and his crew. Okay, so now we've just removed 3 words, right? 3 words have been removed from this. 3 words have been removed, and it's about to change the show. Let's scroll down to the next page, and let's insert some new words into that place. Let's insert a few new words. A smart but struggling man moves to LA to become talent manager for his friend, a newly famous actor, and his crew. What show is this now? Chime in. What show is it now? It's no longer Atlanta. Now it is what? Entourage. Very good. Entourage. For you who chimed in with Dave. Other times people have chimed in with a show called The Other Two. Nope, this one is Entourage. Let's scroll down to that next page. Entourage. There we go. Entourage. A smart but struggling young man moves to LA to become talent manager for his friend, a newly famous actor, and his crew. We changed 3 words. And Atlanta became Entourage. Now, Donald Glover, the creator of Atlanta, and Doug Ellen, the creator of Entourage, could not be more different, but their ideas couldn't be more similar. Give us a simple story that allows you to show just how complex you are as an individual. Not complicated, complex. You and only you are this exact combination of influences that has shaped your perspective, where you're from, when you're from, who raised you, who educated you, how you look, how you feel, how you love, how you laugh, how you suffer. Everything that you do is original. What we're going to do today is teach you how to simplify TV writing so you can most effectively put yourself down on the page. Okay, you can close down this template. I think we've made our point. Entourage and Atlanta could not be more different, but in terms of ideas, very, very similar. The goal here today is to learn how to present yourself through television writing, not to come up with the most original idea that ever happened, but instead to come up with one of the ideas that TV does well and to figure out how to imbue that story with everything that makes you, you. What we're going to do today is simplify television so that you can present yourself to the world. Now, before we go any further, you're going to receive a packet of templates, tips, and tools later today that you can use to guide yourself through this entire creative process. In fact, Kate, let's show it to them right now. Let's open up the PDF packet. We'll just give it a quick scroll so they can see everything that they're taking home. Sorry, I probably shouldn't have had you close down that one. Just give it a quick scroll. Show them just how much is here. Scrolling. You've got all these templates in the order that you should be using them. All you need to do is fill in your information. You won't have to overthink these things. We've done all the thinking for you, and now you get all of these templates that you're going to build from the very first template that you saw all the way until the very end. And if you follow this set of steps, you will have a completed pilot script. All these treasures are yours, my friends. I'm showing this to you now so that you don't feel obligated to write down every word that comes out of my mouth. Instead, I would much prefer it if you just listen, take in each step, feel how simple this can be. You've got 20 some odd pages of templates, and you will be able to watch this video again tomorrow if you want to revisit something I said and jot it down. The truth is, you already know how to write a TV show because you have seen a TV show and you have told a story. What we're going to do today is slow things down enough that you can see TV writing for the collection of simple steps that it is. Pilot writing is a lot like moving in that way. No one is going to confuse it for rocket science. But when you think of all the little things that you have to do to transport your entire life from one location to another, it's overwhelming. How can I accomplish all of these things? You can't accomplish all of them, but you can accomplish each of them. And if you accomplish each one in the order the task mandates, you'll eventually move yourself into a brand new TV pilot script. You can do this. All of you. I am not just saying that. TV writing is for everybody. TV writing is for everybody. So I designed my class to reach everybody. You are capable of understanding these ideas and using them to create your own TV script. No matter who you are, no matter where you are, no matter how you learn or struggle to learn, your lack of experience or your level of experience, everyone can do this. That includes you. You person at home who's staring into a screen, I'm speaking directly to you. You can do this, each and every one of you. You've just got to believe that you can do this. Raise your hand if you believe that you can do this. I want to see hundreds of hands in the air right now. Raise your hand if you can do this work. I have to look where the hands are. Do we have a bunch of hands up, Kate? Yeah, we do.
Yeah, 164. 74.
That's not enough. More hands. More hands. I believe in you. You believe in you. That's a thing I always say in my classes. I will believe in you with such a conviction that it will make you doubt your self-doubt. Nice. This is great. We've got a bunch of excited people who are capable of doing this thing. Hell yeah. Well, let's get started. Let's get started. I'm excited for you. I'm excited for me. I'm excited for Lauren and Kate too. I'm excited for all of us. We're going to change the world today. All right, let's get rolling. You can lower your hands now. Much, much appreciated. I'm excited that you're excited. What a great group. Kate, isn't this a great group?
Absolutely.
Nice. All right, cool. Let's get rolling then. Let's get started, right? A good television show is usually going to be broad in scope. Let's talk a little bit about what makes for a good television show. A good television show is usually broad in scope. We're hoping to tell 100 future stories about this idea, so it can't be overly specific, right? Overly specific ideas make for a good movie, where we're going to be spending roughly 2 hours on just this one thing. But TV stories are less about what happens and more about who it happens to. If we like your characters and we'd willingly return to this world, we'll forgive just about anything else story-wise. If we don't like your characters and world, not even the best story will suffice. Now, there are two types of TV stories. There are high concept stories and low concept stories. High concept and low concept. In short, high concept means story driven. It's sort of like a movie. Low concept, on the other hand, means character driven. It's what TV has historically done best. In high concept, we learn everything that we need to know just from the premise of the show, right? Stranger Things, for instance, is a mystery about the disappearance of a young boy. Every chapter will entail searching for this child and solving this mystery. A low concept series like One Day at a Time, for instance, on the other hand, is about situations that rise for a single Latinx mother dealing with military PTSD. We get a sense of what each episode will offer tonally, but each one is going to stand alone. Now, I'm happy to answer questions about high concept at the end, but this seminar will focus on low concept. I teach high concept as an advanced level class, which you're more than welcome to take at some point in the future. But for now, I'd like to focus on human stories. The world doesn't need more Stranger Things currently. What we need are voices that reflect the totality of the human experience. And that's low concept's bread and butter. So that's what we're going to talk about today, specifically low concept pilots. I can give vague answers about spec scripts and future episodes, but I'm really not an expert on that subject. Pilots are my bag. So that's what we're going to focus on. And if anybody doesn't know, the pilot is the first episode of your television series. There's nothing wrong with not knowing stuff. If you have a question about something that you think maybe feels simple, you ask that question. You always ask your question. There is no such thing as a dumb question. No such thing as a dumb question. You ask any question that you are brave enough to ask. My guess is that you will find 100 other people that wanted to ask that question as well. If you're brave enough to do so, then we all benefit from it. I read the statistic a while back that some insane number of people who die of choking to death do so out of embarrassment. Like they're eating steak at a table, they start to choke, they walk away because they don't want people to see them choking out of shame, and then next thing you know, we find them dead by the maitre d' stand, right? No, don't allow that to happen. Don't choke because you're afraid to admit that you don't understand something. Tell us what you don't get. Now, at appropriate times, we're not going to have you raise your hand just at any moment and I'm going to stop. We're not going to do that. I'm going to stop periodically and have you ask questions, and you're more than welcome to raise your hand then. But until we get to that point, if you want to jot something down in the Q&A, Kate can maybe answer it, or once we get to it in the discussion, I'll be more than happy to respond to that as well. But try to let me just sort of freely flow through the entirety of this work. We will stop periodically. I will stop when it feels like it's an appropriate time for questions, but I can't stop constantly. Yeah, so let's get rolling with it, right? Great. So yeah, if anybody doesn't know, the pilot is the first episode of your television series. The first episode of your television show has several jobs. One, it needs to introduce us to your world and all its characters, establishing a perspective. And from a story standpoint, this needs to be the beginning of a lengthy journey, while also acting as an example of what we can expect from each episode. It's a prototype for what we can expect from your series on a weekly or episodic basis. The audience comes away from a successful pilot understanding, and you don't need to write this down, the audience comes away from a successful pilot understanding whose story they're being told, what story they're being told, why the story is beginning now, any necessary backstory, the context for the story, and who else is part of this world, in that order. And that's what we're going to start by talking about. We're going to discuss each of those 6 questions. Whose story is this? What story are we being told? Why is it starting now? What's the backstory? What is the context for this show? And who else is part of this world? That's what we're going to talk about moving forward. So let's begin with those 6 questions. Let's begin the development part of our work. So we begin developing our stories by answering those 6 essential questions. And really all we're going to do is answer one simple question at a time. One simple question at a time that leads to another, that leads to another, that leads to another, and another, and another. One step at a time. And the first question we ask, like I mentioned, is whose story is this? Whose story is this? We start by establishing a point of view, because until we do, it's a story about nobody, right? Think of it like a solar system. At the center of the solar system is the sun. The sun is going to be your main character or characters. The surrounding planets are your supporting characters. They revolve around the sun and are bound by its gravitational pull. So who's going to be at the center of your solar system? Who's going to be the sun? Well, it's going to depend on whose perspective this is. Now keep in mind, most shows eventually become ensembles. It's just the nature of the TV beast. I invite you to my party and introduce you to my friends, and then they become your friends too, and now we're all friends hanging out at this party together. But in the pilot episode, in the first episode of the show, our concern is who invited us to the party in the first place. So let's go over the various different types. Protagonist-led shows. Kate, actually, let's go ahead and open up the PDF packet, if you don't mind. We'll be able to show them exactly what they're going to be taking home and using moving forward. So a protagonist show. Most TV shows are protagonist-led stories. A protagonist-led story means that there is a main character and their world or journey. Sometimes it's going to be the title character, like this example here, Rami, right? Rami's name is the title of the show. It's a show about Rami. Sometimes it's not the title, not the title or the main character's name in the title. Like Insecure, for instance, was an example of one we watched. It's still about Issa, but it's about a particular component of her personality, her insecurity, right? So that's a protagonist show. We also have protagonist-led ensembles. A protagonist-led ensemble means that there is an ensemble. An ensemble is just a group. This is a show about a group, and there's also a lead within that group. Workplace and family shows usually make up this category, but it's any example with a defined lead can be an example of a protagonist-led ensemble. So like Atlanta is an example of a protagonist-led ensemble, right? Earn and the Crew. Community is probably an example of one, right? Jeff Winger and the Study Group. So yeah, protagonist-led ensembles. If you scroll down to the family example fresh off the boat on the next page, Kate, would appreciate that. Thank you. So this is fresh off the boat. Whose story is this? Protagonist-led ensemble, 11-year-old Eddie Huang and his family, right? So this is a protagonist-led ensemble. We also have ensembles. There are 2 different types of ensembles. An ensemble could be a group, or it could be a collection of connected individuals. It could be a group or a collection of connected individuals. So a group is going to function as a unit. They're all in this together and are treated as a whole rather than the parts, like the gang on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, or the dudes on Workaholics, things like that. We're not worried about them as individuals. We're treating them like a collective whole. The dudes is at the center of the solar system. The gang is at the center of the solar system. Group functions like a unit. They're all in this together. A collection of connected individuals is going to be more about the parts, right? Dear White People was an example that we watched this week. For the sake of the pilot, this type of ensemble will read like a protagonist-led ensemble, so that one member of the collective can introduce us to the world and we can get acclimated before having to take in everyone and everything all at once. If one person invites us in saying, come on in, make yourself at home, you will feel welcome here, then we probably come inside and make ourselves at home, right? If a whole group of people simultaneously say, come on in, make yourself at home, you will feel welcome here, what do? We run away from that cult, right? So what we want is just that one person that will invite us into this world, make us feel at home, and then we can meet the collective. We can meet everybody else all at once. Yeah, so for the sake of the pilot episode on Dear White People, Sam is going to be the protagonist. After that, by episode 2, she's barely in the episode, right? She's going to be around some of the time. It's an ensemble about this collection of individuals within the Black Student Union at Winchester University. For the sake of the pilot episode, it's Sam's episode. Sam is the protagonist. She's going to introduce us into this world that will eventually expand out into becoming an ensemble about the BSU. So that's an ensemble. Then we're also going to have relationship shows. Relationship shows are essentially ensembles of two. They can be romantic or platonic, but the pairing is going to be at the center of the solar system, like Mike and Molly's romantic relationship, or on Broad City, right? It's going to be the platonic relationship between Abby and Alana. It's about that ampersand. Abby ampersand Alana. Mike ampersand Molly. What we're talking about when we say ampersand is an and that combines two people. So in the writing world, in the WGA world, if a script was written by Ben ampersand Kate, what that would mean is that Ben and Kate wrote the script together. If a script is written by Ben and Kate, it means I wrote a pass and then Kate wrote a pass. Relationship shows are all about this pair of characters together, about the relationship between the two of them. It's not Abby show some of the time and Alana show some of the time. Those are always the worst episodes. It should be about the two of them together, the relationship between them. That's a relationship show. Those are the various different types of perspectives that we can have within our show. We're initially looking for whose story this is, who is inviting us into this world. Just so everybody knows, I'm not looking at or responding to anything in the comments. If you want to write a specific question into the Q&A, that's totally fine. But I will say that the chat part is a little bit distracting. I'm going to turn that part off for right now, at least for myself. So if you have a question, you can throw that into the Q&A, but otherwise, we're going to leave off the chat right now. Coming in kind of fast and furious, a little bit distracting. Cool. So yes, that's the perspective of your show. Is this about one character? Is this about a character who is at the center of a larger group of characters? Is it about a larger group of characters? Or is it about a relationship between two characters, essentially an ensemble of two? No matter which example it is, we're always looking for that one thing, right? We're looking for one entity, one person, or one person at the center of a group, or a group that combines to be one entity, or a relationship that forms one pairing of people. We're looking for that one that will be at the center of our solar system. Everything else in this world will surround that one. But that's what we're initially focused on. Whose story is this? Whose story are we telling? If you're taking a picture of a group of people, we want to be able to know from your focus which one of these, let's say this is a youth soccer league. We want to know who your kid is based on how you frame this picture, right? So that's what we're looking for here. Who is at the center of our solar system? That's the first question. We're going to get through all these questions, and I'm going to open it up to questions at the end of this section. And I think I forgot to mention earlier, we're going to take a 5-minute bathroom break a little bit after 11, and then we will take a longer break, 11 if you're here on the West Coast. In about a half hour, we're going to take our first break, about 5 minutes just to use the bathroom and that kind of thing. Then around 12 o'clock our time, so like in an hour and a half, we're going to take a lunch break for a more extended period of time, and we'll come back in the second half. We'll never go much more than an hour without giving you a chance to use the bathroom or grab a drink or return an important text message or whatnot. And there'll be several opportunities to ask questions, but if I let you ask questions at all times, we will never get through this material. So we'll do that at appropriate times, but I do promise we will get to everything. Yes, that first question, whose story is this? Whose perspective are we going to be following? The second question, you can scroll back up to Rami. Let's just keep it on Rami for the time being. Thank you, Kate. The first question is, whose story is this? Whose story are we telling? So now we know whose story this is. It's time to unpack what story we are going to be telling about this person. If you want your audience to come along with you on a lengthy journey, they're going to need to know where you're taking them, right? There are only a few different types of journeys that we're ever going on television. In high concept, it's either going to be a mystery story or a cover-up story. Mystery meaning we are trying to solve some puzzle, answer some question or riddle, or a cover-up. On cover-ups, we're trying to keep a mystery from being solved. But we're going to focus on low-concept stories, like I said, which are going to fall into two categories: situations and personal growth. Low-concept stories fall into two categories: situations and personal growth. Situations are like sitcoms, right? But they don't have to be comedies. Dear White People is a situation dramedy. The Sopranos is a situation drama. All those procedural shows that we watch are situation mysteries, right? They're about the situations that arise while solving mysteries. The situation, Sopranos is about the situations that arise when a New Jersey mob boss tries to balance his two families, the one at home and the one at work. Yes, these are situation-based shows, whether they are comedic or not. Oftentimes they will be sitcoms, but regardless of what the tone of your show is, any show that's based on a series of one-off situations, standalone situations week after week, that would be an example of a situation-based show, a situation-based low-concept show. And then the other example, personal growth. Personal growth stories are usually going to be like coming-of-age stories or redemption stories, finding oneself or picking up the pieces of one's life. Yes, situation-based stories about the situations that arise for a character or a group of characters, personal growth about the personal development of the character who is at the center of your solar system or the characters at the center of your solar system. So when you combine that with your perspective, you now have something like a coming-of-age story about a young man, right? A coming-of-age story is the journey about a young man. We're going to say this is the protagonist. In the case of Rami, we'll say this is a protagonist, Rami Hassan. We're not going to introduce the name Rami Hassan within this because it doesn't matter, right? But what we are going to say is that this is the coming-of-age journey about a young man. Coming-of-age journey about a young man, nature of the journey plus the perspective. And then from there, we're going to add in a hook. The hook is the interesting and or relatable thing about your show. Ideally, it's going to be both. The perfect show is 75% about all of us and 25% specific to you. What is it that's so interesting about this coming of age about a young man? Well, in this case, he's doing it while balancing the two halves to his Muslim American identity. So when you put it all together, a coming of age story about a young man searching for self while balancing the disparate halves to his Muslim American identity. And we'll open up the chat for a second again here. And you can tell us what this sentence is an example of. A coming-of-age story about a young man searching for self while balancing the disparate halves to his Muslim American identity. What is that an example of? What is that sentence an example of? Very good. A log line. Very good. Very good. So that's how you form a log line, right? A log line is the nature of this journey. Could be a coming of age or a sitcom or a comedy or a dramedy or a mystery or a cover-up. The nature of this journey. What type of story are you telling us? Plus the perspective that we've already established by whose story is this, plus the hook, the interesting and or relatable thing about your show. Very simple. One simple sentence that tells us everything that we need to know about this journey, right? It's simple, it's easily digestible, and now we know exactly what you have to, what your log line has to contain in order for you to create one, right? You don't have to overthink these things. It's journey plus perspective plus hook, that equals log line. So that's whose story is this? So we've established, that's what story are we being told? So we've established whose story this is. We've established what story we're being told. The next question that we're going to ask ourselves is, why is this story beginning now? Why is the story beginning now? So again, we know who this is about. We know what it's about. Now, why are we starting to tell this story now? The size of the beginning is going to depend on the size of the stakes of your show. What do we mean by the stakes of your show? What is ultimately on the line here? What are we attempting to achieve, right? So the higher the stakes, the larger the new beginning. If this is going to be an epic journey like the one we mentioned on Stranger Things, it's going to have an epic beginning like a child going missing, right? Because we need something massive if we're going to go on a massive journey. If this is a situation comedy, it's just going to be the perfect situation to help us wrap our head around this world, right? The blackface party on Dear White People, right? This is a perfect example of the type of strife that the Black Student Union is going to face at this extremely white, racist beneath the surface university, right? Gerard and Maxine living together on the Carmichael Show was an example. Big or small, why is this the perfect time to start telling/watching this particular show, right? So if it's going to be a massive journey that we're going on, then you're going to give us something that's exciting enough to make us want to go along on this lengthy and probably difficult, conflict-ridden journey. And if it's going to be small, if it's just going to be weekly episodes involving, like on The Office, for instance, the type of hijinks they get into at a middling East Coast paper company, then you're going to give us a small beginning that feels like it's just enough to provide 22 minutes of conflict-driven and funny content, right? If you're just going to give us a show where each and every episode is a standalone, where each and every episode is singular and will be wrapped up by the end, then you just need to give us a big enough new beginning for 22 minutes of television. If you're giving us a massive journey that's going to take us on a 6-season quest, then you need a massive beginning that will excite us and entice us into going along on this journey. So that's why the story is beginning now. We're going to go through the 6 questions, and then I will open it up to questions from the group, but I want to get through all 6 first. Appreciate you all bearing with me. I think I left the chat open maybe, and everybody's doing a good job of keeping that contained. Very good. I appreciate you. So yes, we've got those 3 questions answered. We've answered the question, whose story is this? Whose solar system is this? What story are we being told? What journey are we going on with this character, with these characters? Then we discussed, why is it beginning now? Why is this the perfect time to enter into this journey? The next question is, what is the backstory? What is the backstory to this journey? We've got the perspective. We've got the journey. We understand why it's starting now. Now, we essentially want to know, why should we come along with this group of strangers, right? Now, let me start by saying you're going to get to know your main character or characters exhaustively in every which way, because in order to make decisions on their behalf, you have to really, really know them. Think about how few people you would be willing to order a soft drink for if they were in the bathroom when the waiter came to the table. Maybe a significant other, maybe a sibling, maybe your best friend, almost nobody else, right? And that's not that important of a decision, diet versus regular, right? You want to know these people intimately and confidently so that you can answer every question that you would be faced with when it arises within your show or future episodes of your show. You really, really, really need to know your main character, as well as you at least know your best friends, maybe as well as you know yourself. But then from there, we're going to focus on the backstory of this specific journey. Focus on the history that has shaped the person that we meet at the top of the show. Now, if you were applying for a job at NASA or wherever, right, you maybe wouldn't tell them about the summer that you worked as a teenager for Dairy Queen, even though it was a formative part of your life. Maybe it was the first time that you dated. Maybe it was where you met your best friend, right? But it's not going to help you to get this particular job. The emotional backstory that you're looking for, the emotional resume that you're presenting to us in this situation, is the one that is going to get us on board with the journey that we are going on over the course of this series. So if this was a redemption story, for instance, then you might detail the rise to the top and eventual plummet. On a sitcom, you would detail what is so interesting or relatable about this world or this group of people. What do we need to know about this world, about these people, in order to get it and to care? Why should we go on a journey with these particular people? That's what we're looking for with the backstory. Why should we care enough to go on this journey? Yes, okay, you've explained to us who it's about. You've explained to us what it's about. You've explained to us why it's starting now. But now you got to convince us why we should care about this journey. How is it going to relate to us, or how is it going to be unique in a way that excites us to continue on? That's what we mean by the backstory. So backstory. We got a couple more of these, and then we will stop momentarily and get to some questions. Next question up is, where does the story take place? Where does the story take place? So now that we have a sense of who, what, and why with this story, it's time to contextualize it. So this is more than just where your show takes place in the world. This is more than just locations. You're establishing the reality of your show. If this is our reality, is this our reality, or is this an alternate one, right? Alternate reality might mean monsters and aliens, but it also might just be a world in which, say, for instance, Donald Trump isn't president. Or on Dear White People, for instance, Winchester is a fictional college, right? They have a show on that show that they watch that's essentially Scandal, but it's not Scandal, right? It's slightly alternate from our world. It's very similar to our world. It is a representation of our world, but it is a fictional representation of our world. So that's something that you might consider, right? Additionally, you might focus on the fact that this is our world, but that it takes place in the past or maybe in the future, right? Fresh Off the Boat, for instance. It's Orlando, but it's Orlando 1994. That's what we're contextualizing. It's not just the locations themselves. It's what do we need to know about these locations? Is this our reality? Is this our timeline? In most cases, it probably is. It's probably present day, and it's a real life city involving real life people, not real life people, but involving characters that exist in a world with the real life people that we come to know as celebrities or as famed. But in some cases, and if this is the case in your show, you would also be establishing the nature of your reality. Is this ours, or is this an alternate one? But then in terms of where your show takes place, we're going to consider it from two different perspectives, right? We're going to consider it from two perspectives. One, the great big universe, and two, the small world. So big universe, small world. The universe is big picture where your show takes place. On Fresh Off the Boat, it's Orlando. On Atlanta, it's Atlanta, right? On some animated shows, the universe is going to be the entirety of the universe. Anywhere that your characters can travel without it seeming abnormal. That's the universe of your show. If on The Simpsons they leave Springfield, it's an abnormal episode. Everything within Springfield is fair game. That's the big universe of your show. Now, the small world, on the other hand, is going to be made up of a few locations within your universe that we're going to see in every single episode. So usually this is going to be like home, work, a hangout spot or two. There are plenty of places that you go sometimes, but only a few where people might think to look for you if they needed to find you. Those are your primary locations. We make sure to introduce these within our pilot. We try to make sure to introduce these within the first 10 pages of our pilot. All of the important places from your world need to be established and introduced right off the bat. So we've got this big universe of our show, everywhere our characters could travel to if the episode called for it, and then the small world of our show, everywhere we definitely know that they will be going to because it is a central part of their world. That's the context for our show. That's question number 5. We're on to our 6th question. Question number 6. Who else is involved in this story? So lastly, we're going to focus on who's coming along with this journey. We know whose show it is. We know what the show is about. We know why it's starting now. We know the necessary backstory. We know the context within which it will be contained. And lastly, we're going to focus on who else is coming along with us on this journey. You can tell a lot about your protagonists from the company that they keep. Your main character should feel three-dimensional in a pilot. With supporting characters, we're really only concerned with these 3 central reference points: role, dynamic, and character game. In that order: role, dynamic, and character game. And you see we've got these things written right here. You don't have to jot down every word that comes out of my mouth, just a quick reminder. Let's start by talking about role. Let's go over each of these individually. So when it comes to support, your first objective isn't to create interesting side characters. Instead, it's to establish the roles that need filling in your story. Think about it like you're staffing a restaurant. You need a cook, you need a waiter, you need a host, you need a busser, etc., etc., etc. You don't need a Kevin the Forgetful Stoner, but if your waiter is Kevin the Forgetful Stoner, that could be a lot of fun, right? So you give them a role, then you give them a kook, because there's no use growing attached to a bunch of kooky weirdos who you don't get to keep because they don't serve a purpose in your show. There's an expression: you are the sum of the 5 people with whom you spend the most time. I'll say that again. You are the sum of the 5 people with whom you spend the most time. Yes. If I was to say to you that without knowing anything about this character, that the people in their lives are a mother, a daughter, a coworker, a best friend, and a boss, we would be able to ascertain certain things about this character without knowing anything more. For one, probably does not have a significant relationship currently, but there's definitely a daughter, so at one point they probably did. At least doesn't have a relationship with the father currently. Maybe the father's no longer in the picture at all, but because that character isn't listed, we know that they're not a central part of their life. We know they've got a coworker and a boss, which means that this character is not the boss. In all likelihood, this character is not at the bottom of the totem pole either, because there is somebody alongside them. They've got a best friend, which means that there is some degree of socialization that goes on within this character's life. We can't ascertain everything, but you can ascertain quite a bit about what's going on in this character's world just from knowing the other people who exist simultaneous to them. So it's also going to tell us where this character is going to: mother, daughter, coworker, best friend, boss. We know at the very least that home and workplace are going to be 2 of the central locations, right? Why? Because that's where we're finding some of the characters that are going to be central to our existence. We know our locations based on who we're going to be encountering in the world. If I say that one of the main characters in my character's life is a bartender, then we know that a bar is going to be one of the primary locations, right? So we're able to ascertain a lot just from the roles that fill out this world. And additionally, even more with an ensemble. Like when I was saying, if I hadn't told you that we were staffing a restaurant, I just told you that the roles were waiter, host, busser, cook, manager, you would know that we were at a restaurant, right? What we're doing is creating context for our world through some of the other people that we will encounter. We have not yet decided anything about them as people. We're just establishing these roles. Busser, host, waiter, cook, yeah, that kind of thing. So that's what we do first. We establish the roles that our story requires in order to keep moving forward. From there, we're going to establish relationship dynamics. That's what we mean by dynamic. So yes, role, relationship dynamic. Relationship is a dynamic is about establishing how each character interacts with the lead or the group. So like on Insecure, it would be how a supporting character gets along with Issa. Often as simple as friend versus foe. On some shows, though, most often family shows, friends and foes are going to be one and the same. On One Day at a Time, Penelope's mother and kids are her greatest source of support, but they're also her greatest source of grief, right? On ensembles, the relationship dynamic will be about establishing how a character interacts with the group. Why don't you scroll down to the Dear White People example in a couple of pages, Kate, if you don't mind. I'll show this example. So yeah, the relationship dynamics, please. So yeah, what we have here, Sam, she's the host of Dear White People radio show. That's her role. Her dynamic is she's the revolutionary in the group. Joelle is the mediator. Reggie is the quote unquote angry one. Lionel is the reluctant hero. We're establishing their relationship within the group. They've got a role, and then their dynamic is how they interact with this collective of individuals that makes up their ensemble. So yeah, the funny one, the neurotic one, the angry one, that kind of thing. We're establishing who they are within this collective group. That's what relationship dynamic is. Character games. A character game, lastly, is a recurring, unchanging trait that best defines and identifies a character. By the end of the pilot, we need to be able to point to a character and aptly summarize them. We want to be able to point to Pierce on Community and say, he's an old white racist. That's all you need to know about him. He's a rich old white racist. Let's stop and talk about Community for a second, actually. I want to point out why we brought this one up. It's an example of what I like to call a college brochure. Community is an example of what I refer to as a college brochure. Sure, it has the appearance of diversity because the appropriate skin tones were chosen to give off that appearance, like in that curated diversity pic from every college brochure, right? That has a group of students on the lawn that have never met prior to this, but they're all snapped in a picture as if they're the best of friends. That's what Community is. That's what a show like Brooklyn Nine-Nine is. That's what a show like Superstore is. You've all probably heard of the term whitewashing in Hollywood. Raise your hand if you've heard of the term whitewashing in Hollywood. A lot of you. Yeah. Exactly. So if you haven't, what whitewashing means is when a white actor plays a part that would be intended for a person of color. That's what whitewashing is. Within the Hollywood sphere, whitewashing, right? Whitewashing is bad enough on its own. This is puppeteering. College brochuring is so much worse than whitewashing. What we're saying is we're going to allow these people of color, these faces of color, to move their mouths, but a white voice is going to come out of them. Sure, it has the appearance of diversity because the appropriate skin tones were chosen, but the words are provided by a white voice. This is how stereotypes begin and perpetuate. Whitewashing, avoid whitewashing, avoid college brochuring. It's even worse. I digress. The game shouldn't be overly specific. Instead, it's the umbrella under which specific examples will fall. We wouldn't say Only Eats Pickles is a character game, but Marches to the Beat of Her Own Drum is, and Only Eats Pickles would be an example of that. Character game isn't what you do, it's what's said about you by what you do. When we say Pierce is an old, rich, white racist, we instantly know how he will react to various different situations, unfortunately. So yes, when you put it all together, for supporting characters, we're looking for their purpose in the story. We're looking for how they relate to the lead or group and the characteristic that best defines them. That is a character game, or sorry, that's supporting characters. That's who is involved in this story. And those are the 6 questions that we're asking. So those 6 questions you'll ask and answer when developing your story. That information combines to be what the industry refers to as a one sheet. A one sheet is approximately 1 page of essential information about your show. It's often the first thing you're asked for, so it's the first thing we create. You answer those 6 questions to create a one sheet. If somebody wanted to know what your story is all about, this is what they would be asking for. Now, you're going to make it feel a little bit less rigid, a little less structured, a little more free-flowing, but this is all of the information that they would be looking for. We will stop now and we will answer questions about development work if you have it. Kate, do you want to manage the Q&A and I'll answer questions?
Sure. Do you want to start with the questions that are already in the Q&A and then go to live questions?
Yeah, why don't you ask me the questions in the Q&A? And,
okay. So can you go over the breakdown between low concept and high concept again?
Low concept are stories about the characters. High concept is the story itself. Like if each and every journey is going to be a chapter in this one saga that starts at the beginning of your series and will conclude at the very end, like How I Met Your Mother is an example. How I Met Your Mother, they introduce us to the reality that there definitely is a mother of these children in the future, and 77 hours and 208 episodes later, we actually get to the point where we have met the mother of this children. That's what high concept is. Every single episode is driven by the premise of your show, driven by the story itself. Low concept means that we're really more interested in the characters. We're going to spend individual episodes going over the things that they encounter in their lives. But if you're watching a show like Friends, if you're watching a show like Dear White People, if you're watching a show like Fresh Off the Boat, our expectation is that every episode is going to be about something unique and different. Now, that doesn't mean that there won't be arcs to the series, that there won't be multiple episodes that are devoted to the same themes, but every episode is a standalone example of this series, as opposed to in high concept, where every episode is going to be driving that same story forwards. There's often this misconception that high concept means weird. Oftentimes, these stories are weird, but it doesn't have anything to do with weird. High concept means that story drives every moment of your series, that the same story, the missing, that Will Byers on Stranger Things is missing, we're now going to focus on that. And when we find Will Byers, it's going to open up more mystery that stems from that same mystery, always focused on the same storyline throughout. Low concept, every individual episode is a different story involving these same characters and similar themes. Cool. What's the next question, Kate?
Great. And just to clarify, Ben, are you wanting to have questions just about the development template now, and then you'll have a general question section later, or do all questions apply?
No, only things about what we've covered already.
Okay.
We'll have to stop at other times to answer questions about different things, and then anything that you want me to. And if you ask about a television show that I didn't, just skip over any question about a television show that we didn't cover. I'm more than happy to try to answer those at the end, but you can't assume that I've watched every television show in existence. And I sometimes will need a little bit more time to unpack those. But yeah, let's just focus on things that are specific to what we've been covering so far.
Okay.
Please.
So are there examples of shows that both are situational, like sitcom, and also have personal growth in them?
I mean, no. I mean, the idea behind a sitcom is that we're not really expecting a great deal of change. We're expecting our characters to stay the same throughout these situations. If it's a personal growth story, then our expectation is that we're going to start by saying, okay, like, this is when our character arrives at college, or this is when our character like moves to New York City and they begin this journey of personal growth. In a sitcom, we would say these are the stories about these people who live in New York City, right? So it's not to say that there won't be some of the elements of a sitcom present during a coming of age story, meaning like situations, and meaning like simple episode templates, an episode template just being an example of the type of episodes we can expect on a weekly basis. But in terms of the journey itself, no, we're either saying that like this is a story about this world that it will essentially always be this way, or we're saying this is a story of personal growth about a character who will evolve over the course of a series. Yeah.
Great.
So the next one.
Okay. So is the backstory always in the pilot?
Not necessarily. I mean, especially in a sitcom, like Broad City would be a good example of one in which we don't actually learn how they became friends until maybe like season 4, or Workaholics was one I mentioned earlier. We don't know how they became I didn't watch that show for the most part, but we don't know within the pilot episode that how their friendship formed. Oftentimes in a coming of age journey, we will get the backstory. Oftentimes in a high concept journey, we will get the backstory. But if it's just sort of a standard sitcom about these people and we're being inserted into their lives in the middle, no, I think eventually we'll probably figure out the backstory, but it's perfectly fine if we don't achieve that in the pilot episode. But that probably would be, that would probably be specific to sitcoms. Or not sitcoms, but situation-based shows.
Mm-hmm. Okay. There's a question about elaborating on college brochuring. Just to clarify, is that something that you're able to do right now?
Let's do it at the end.
Okay, great. Question is, how do anthology series figure into this breakdown?
Anthology series aren't really television. They're really more very long movies. So I think we would treat those as high concept. Yeah.
Okay.
Because we're expecting it by the end of one season to be concluded. So any mini series, any anthology, any short series, probably consider it high concept. We're working towards this sort of short distance end game at all times. Anything that's low concept is probably going to be more nebulous. Like we wouldn't say, oh yeah, we need 6 seasons of Dear White People. We would instead say like, okay, for as long as this show is popular, we can probably come up with scenarios to insert these characters into, but like a coming of age in a movie, we would say like a coming of age, like, hey, this is a conversation you and I had recently. Like coming of age in a movie is probably going to be about a specific event, right? Like your first girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, as opposed to in television where we're going to say a coming of age is just about like the experiences of growing up, right? So that can go for as long as those experiences entertain. Anthologies, what we're saying is like, this is going to conclude at the end of this 1 season or 6 episode or 10 episodes series, and anything that has an end game in mind is high concept. Without going too deep into it, that's the difficult thing about high concept, is that you have to know how it begins and ends from the very beginning so you can be headed in that direction. If you told me that that we were driving from Los Angeles to New York, that's high concept. I know where we're ultimately going to end up. If you told me that we're going on a road trip, we might end up anywhere, and the road trip is the journey. That's low concept. So you got to know where the destination is in high concept. In low concept, you just sort of have to know vaguely what direction we're headed in. What else we got?
Great. And just for everyone,
Q&A numbers are not going down.
What's that?
I'm noticing that the Q&A numbers are not going down.
Totally.
So, at a certain point, we might have to stop, but. And like I said, we'll try to get to everything in the Q&A at the end, but let's take a few more at least, and then we'll take a 5-minute bathroom break.
Fabulous. And for everyone, if you can put your questions in the Q&A, it says Q&A, you can click on it and you can type there. It's hard for me to toggle between the chat and the Q&A. So right now I'm just in the Q&A. Okay. Could you go over the concept of game again?
Game, well, the difference between a game and an arc is any story that like will evolve, will develop. A game is just like when we say what is a character's game, what we're saying is who are they in a nutshell in a way that's never going to change. So if you're watching like New Girl or whatever, you'd point to Schmidt and be like, that's Schmidt, he's a lovable douchebag. That's everything that you need to know. That's Pierce, he's a rich old racist, right? That's everything that you need to know in order to understand how this character is going to interact with the group, right? So yeah, with a game, what we're saying is this is who a character is in a nutshell. But we're not attempting to explain anything ultra specific about them. We're instead saying this is the component to their personality that will best impact the decision making of this character. It's who they are. It's that most identifiable trait about them that we never really expect to change. So if this is a character like Pierce, for instance, then our expectation is that he's going to stay the same throughout. Schmidt, he's going to stay the same throughout, right? Any of our secondary characters, we're probably expecting that they're not going to fully evolve, but instead stay roughly the way that they are. Our main character, our protagonist, we expect that character to evolve into a better version of themselves in any situation other than a sitcom or a situation-based show. With our supporting characters, we're just expecting them to be who they are at all times. If your character shows up with the sniffles in the first episode, and by the next episode they've gotten over their cold, we're confused by that. You introduce us in the pilot episode to who they are in their purest form. It's what I call the Garfield rule. If you're going to introduce Garfield in the pilot, you don't introduce him on a Tuesday, because Garfield is obsessed with Mondays. He's not having a rare craving for baked ziti because Garfield is obsessed with lasagna. Introduce us to your characters exactly the way that you want us to remember them, so that when we come back around, we don't have to be reintroduced to these characters. Yeah.
Great.
Oh, good. We've gone up again in questions.
Inquiring minds
let's do
want
two
to know.
more later. Yeah.
Can you repeat the formula for log lines?
It's the nature of the journey plus the perspective plus the hook. Nature of the journey plus the perspective plus the hook. And also keep in mind, in terms of like repeating things that I did say earlier, you will have access to this video later. You can go back and get all that information. If I can repeat it quickly, I'm willing to do so. But otherwise, just know that you'll have this video at least through Monday, if not longer.
Great. Here's a good one. When the show is centered around the protagonist, should all character dynamics be in relation to them?
Yes.
Great.
That one was easy.
Okay. Let's see. So is there...
tea.
What's that?
The tea I'm drinking is 90% honey at this point. It's very disgusting. I might
That
do
sounds
something like
gross.
this soon. Very gross.
Is there, are there shows that blend high concept and low concept?
I mean, I think most shows will have a little bit of both to them, but no, there's not going to be a hybrid of low and high concept shows. Everybody who's got a hand up, I'm just going to lower those hands. Yeah, I'm just going to lower them for you. Cool. No, it's not going to be a combination of a high and low concept series. That would be like having a car with two drivers. Only one, either the characters or the story are going to drive the series moving forward, but that doesn't mean that you won't have elements of high concept to your low concept series or elements of low concept to your high concept series, in particular the latter. If this is a high concept series, we still need to really, really care about your characters if we're going to go along on this journey, right? So it's definitely important to imbue them with all these same characteristics that are on display, to make sure that we understand their role, to make sure we understand how they interact with others, and to make sure like what is that characteristic about them that is like truly that truly defines them. But ultimately, what we are asking for in a high concept series is to be really focused on the story and use the characters to better enhance that story. In low concept, it's not like we won't have some arcs to a series. It's not like we won't have a, like I mentioned, Sopranos is a low concept series, but every season has sort of a high concept story driven arc to it. At the end of that season, though, it's going to end and we're going to move on to a new set of stories involving these same characters and these same themes. The goal is always to have a little bit of story and a little bit of characterization in your show. The question, though, is which one is driving the story moving forward? Is this a story about these people? Are we more worried about just their personal growth, in which case the things that are happening to them are secondary to their personal evolution? Or are we saying this is really, really about the story and these are just the characters who the story is happening to? Mm-hmm. Let's do one more and then we'll take a break.
Okay, let's see. Can you give some suggestions on what to put in the character's backstory and how to make it dynamic and relatable and what you need there?
Kind of no, because I mean, every story is going to be specific to what's important about that particular story. I mean, what we're looking for, just like if you were telling me about a character, if this was a love story involving a character, if this was a personal growth story involving like a character searching for love, then what I would want to know about was like their history with love, maybe their parents' relationships, maybe like the first time they ever had their heart broken, that kind of thing. What's the important information that would set us up for the journey of your series? If your character was like going off to law school for the first time, tell me about like their history with education. Tell me if they're the smartest one in their family. Tell me about what their parents do, that kind of thing. If this is a mystery, then what's the important information that we would need to know in order to understand that this is like a compelling story to go on as a journey? You know, like a mystery is only mysterious if you care about solving it. And so why do we want to solve this particular mystery? In a cover-up, why would we care? Why are we going to be on the side of this person who is essentially a liar, right? We are choosing to be on the side of the liar / the lie. So in a coming of age, or sorry, in a cover-up story, we're going to need the backstory that informs us as to why, despite the fact that this person is doing something that we wouldn't ordinarily agree with, why we're going to be on their side. Yeah, just what is necessary in order for us to understand and be on board with this journey. We have to love this character. We don't necessarily have to like the character, but we have to love them enough to go on a lengthy journey with them. This is just the backstory that's going to be specific to this particular journey. If you're telling me, like I said, if you're telling me about trying to get a job at NASA, I don't really care about that summer that you spent working at Dairy Queen. If you're telling me about your relationship with your best friend and you met at Dairy Queen, then I definitely care about that. What's going to be important to the journey that we're about to go on? Oh my God, the Q&A numbers have actually gone down. I'll do one more question and then we'll stop at 11:10.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. Let's see. So in a protagonist-led ensemble, should there be one relationship within the ensemble that carries more weight? Can you review that?
I mean, there doesn't need to be, but there frequently is. You know, like a Jim and Pam on The Office, or yeah, I mean, there often is a Jim and Pam or a Ross and Rachel. You know, I think, to put it sort of bluntly, it's a pretty white thing, I would say, to do. But I don't think it's altogether necessary, but often we will, especially within a sitcom, we will establish like, yes, this is the will they or won't they relationship that's most important. But it's not necessary to have one of those. It can be fun, you know, especially in these workplace environments. Like that work wife, work husband kind of dynamic is one that people have played with historically. But like I said, it feels pretty white to me. Feels a little antiquated. Nothing wrong with having it, but I think that I like a show like the Carmichael Show, where I think all the different relationships between all the different characters are on display and are made important. Sure, Gerard's with Maxine and Bobby's with Nikisha and the parents are together, but like, I like watching the way in which various different sort of like platonic and romantic and happy and sad relationships can exist within an ensemble environment. So yeah. Okay, cool. It's 11:11. Let's take a break. Let's be back at 11:16, and I'll start cranking out some more stuff. If we didn't get to your question yet, I will get to it later, and I'll try to stick around for as long as I can to, you know, at least sort of answer everybody's questions. But those were good questions, and I appreciate your help, Kate. Take a quick break, everybody, and we will see you back in 5 minutes. All right. Is everybody back? Is Kate back? Lost Kate. We'll wait just a second here. There she is. Hey Kate.
Hi.
Did you have a tech problem, or were you just off screen?
Just now?
Yeah.
I was getting some water.
Oh, cool. Nice. Yeah, great. So yeah, the thing we went over just now was the one sheet. That's a one sheet. Yeah, we will get to those other questions. I'm willing to stay a little bit late today. Kate doesn't have to. Kate's got more important things to do, but I'm willing to stick around and answer
Debatable.
your questions for, yeah, debatable. No debating with me. I got nothing after this. You don't teach a 5-hour seminar and then make a bunch of chatty plans. So we'll just hang out until we feel satisfied, until we all feel like we're ready to go kick butt in this world. So yeah, that was a one sheet. That's what we went over. Went over all the information's contained within a one sheet. Let's move on now to outlining. Let's talk about outlining. So there are 3 phases to our outlining. 3 phases to our outlining that are going to combine to create a simple, logical, scenic telling of your story before you go to write it. I'm going to tell you about them all together, and then we'll go over each in a little bit more detail. So the 3 phases, there's the general outlining. We map out the major beats of our story, giving it structure in the general outline. Major beats are turning points in your plot. Think of it like a GPS. It's not going to tell you to keep heading straight, only when it's time to change direction. The general outline maps out every change in the direction of your story. The step outline. Step outline is where we attempt to tell the logical version of our story. General outline is simple, step outline is logical. The step outline is where you tell your story in simple scenes. A simple scene contains all the information of a scene, the who, what, where, when, why, without the detail. Let's show them a simple scene, if you don't mind, Kate. Let's open up the simple scene PDF.
You got it.
Thank you.
Let's see.
Great, simple scene. So this is from Atlanta. Interior van's bedroom, that's where the scene takes place. Morning, that's when the scene takes place. In this case, it's just morning. We don't know exactly what time it is, but if there was a previous scene, if we were saying that if the previous scene took place in the morning and then this scene was taking place, say, a little while later, it would say interior van's bedroom a little bit later, something like that. Then Ern and Van bicker about rent money. This is what happens in the scene and why the scene is taking place, what the purpose of the scene is. We're just looking for the purpose of the scene in a simple scene. And then Ern and Van, these are the 2 characters, the 2 main characters who are involved in this scene. So we only include principal cast members, the main cast of our show within this parentheses within a simple scene. So interior Van's bedroom where, morning when, Ern and Van bicker about rent money, what and why, and Ern and Van are in the scene who. That's a simple scene, an example of a simple scene. The collected simple scenes create a sort of skeleton for your story. You couldn't look at a skeleton and say, hey, that's Kevin's skeleton. But you could look at a skeleton and notice if any bones are missing, right? You're looking for missing bones, aka leaps in logic with the step outline, because this is the logical outline. And then lastly, the detailed step outline. The detailed step outline. The goal of the detailed step outline is to be scenic. Your story, this is telling your story in all its glorious detail. Your goal here is to create interesting scenes for your characters to have conversations in. Common misconception, the writing part is the creative part. No, this is the creative part. The writing is the constructive part. You're putting the pieces of your puzzle together. In the detailed outline, you will write your story. In the script, you bring it to life with dialogue. I'll say that again. The writing is the constructive part. The outlining is the creative part. You are putting the pieces of your puzzle together in the script. You're putting the pieces of your puzzle together in the script and bringing it to life with dialogue. So that's the detailed outline. So yes, general outline, telling our story in major beats. Step outline, telling our story in simple scenes, and detailed outlining, telling our story in all its glorious detail. So now let's jump back to the general outlines and talk about them more. This is what we're going to spend the majority of our outlining time talking about. Before we go any further, we need to discuss act structure. We need to discuss story structure. I teach the 3-act structure, but it has nothing to do with TV. TV act structure is all about dividing up the show to sell ads. I teach 3 acts because it's universal throughout all of storytelling. 3 acts equals beginning, middle, and end, or introduction, the action, and the resolution. Let's go over the objective of each act, and I think you will quickly find story structure is nothing to be afraid of. But actually, I'd like to ask the question before we go any further. Raise your hand if story structure, if act structure is something that's caused you grief in the past, if that's something that you've struggled with, or one of the reasons you really wanted to attend this particular seminar. A lot of hands, a lot of hands, a lot of hands. Let's not overthink it. Pretty much every hand, almost every hand has gone up. That totally makes sense. I think that it's often treated like it's more difficult than it needs to be, but really just think of it as beginning, first act, middle, second act, end, third act, introduction, first act, the action of the story, second act, the resolution or the conclusion of the story, the third act. So yeah, let's go over each of the acts in terms of their objective. So the objective of Act 1 is to introduce and establish. Simple rule, if you are introducing a person, a place, or a plot for the first time, it should go in the first act. The first act is going to be approximately 10 pages of your script, of a 30-page script. 10 pages of a 30-page script. About 1/3 will be devoted to introductions. Introduce us to the world, introduce us to your characters, introduce us to the stories that we're going to be telling over the course of this series, and in particular, this episode. So Act 1, make all of your introductions. In Act 2, tell a good story. The objective of Act 2 is to tell a good story. The things that you introduced in Act 1, in Act 2, you're going to use them to tell a great story. Act 2 is the longest act because if the intro or the conclusion of the story is longer than the story itself, it's not a great story. And the objective of Act 2 is just to tell a great story with some ups and some downs, some ebbs and some flows, right? We're going to expect to have a plan of attack, and then we're going to expect a little bit of conflict, and then we're going to expect some retaliation against whatever that obstacle was, and then we're going to expect another obstacle, some ups and some downs, some ups and some downs. That's the objective of Act 2, to tell a good conflict-heavy story. The objective of Act 3 is to conclude and launch. Only end beats in Act 3. We'll wrap up this chapter of the saga, this chapter of the story, while indicating that the story will continue on. Whatever it is that your main characters are aiming for, it's not going to be achieved in the pilot episode, because then what would the show be about moving forward? So instead, we will conclude just this particular episode. We will learn some lesson as the result of it, and we will show how the story moves forward in perpetuity. If we don't learn a lesson, then however we concluded this story, however we resolved this story, becomes the end to that journey. By learning a lesson, we can conclude this particular chapter while indicating that there are more chapters and more lessons to be learned. So Act 1, the objective is to do all of your introductions, introduce your characters, introduce your locations, introduce your story. In Act 2, it's to tell a great story using everything that you introduced in the first act. And in Act 3, the objective is to conclude that story, this individual one-episode story, while indicating that there are either more stories to come or that this story has not concluded. Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. It's that simple. Sometimes people will raise their hand and say, like, well, what about a 5-act structure like they have on like network television? There's no such thing as a 5-act structure. 3 acts means beginning, middle, and end. Now, if you want to have 5 stopping points in your episode because you want to insert that many commercial breaks, then fine. It's still a 3-act structure. Act 1 is the beginning. Act 2 is the middle. Act 3 is the end. When we think about the cold open is part of the first act. When we think about the tag, we haven't talked about tags yet, but I haven't actually talked much about cold opens yet either. We will. The tag is the little moment of comedy, usually, the little moment of conclusion that rolls alongside the credits at the end of your episode. That would be part of Act 3. The tag is part of Act 3. The cold open is part of Act 1. Act 1, introductions. Act 2, the action. Act 3, the conclusion. Very simple, 3-act structure. So now let's show that 3-act structure in action using a general outline. The general outline is going to be made up of 10 simple sentences, no more, no less. Let's show them one. Kate, let's scroll down once we've opened up the packet again to the general outline for Rami, please, if you don't mind.
On it.
Thank you. General outlines.
There we go.
All right. Perfect. Thank you. So 10 simple sentences that map out the arc of your pilot episode in major beats. That's what a general outline is. This is a nice little simple structure that when we put it all together is going to equal out to the story area for your pilot episode. Everything that you intend to cover within this story. Where are we starting from? How far will we get to by the end of the episode? We'll have a nice structure in place. Beginning, middle, and end. So if we're looking at this example, the first beat right off the top, Act 1. So Act 1 is all introductions. Act 1, Rami Hassan in the cold open attends mosque where he's made to feel like he is not Muslim enough, right? Rami Hassan attends mosque where he's made to feel like he is not Muslim enough. This is the introduction to our show. Introduction to our show. The first moments of your show really need to illustrate what is interesting, fun, funny, cool, unique about your show. Often the beginning of your show will be a cold open, but not necessarily. A cold open literally means a scene or scenes before the opening credits. Its main goal is to introduce the title of your show. Its main goal is to introduce the title of your show. Either your cold open introduces your title, or this is just Act 1, Scene number 1. It is not necessary to have a cold open. There's nothing wrong with starting with just Act 1, but if you want it to be a cold open, it should serve as an introduction to your title. Regardless of whether this is cold open or Act 1, there are 4 ways to introduce your series and make a strong impression. And it's not to say that these 4 are mutually exclusive. They don't have to necessarily be separate. You could have a combination of the 2, but these are the 4 ways in which you go about introducing a story with a backstory. So with the backstory, what do we need to know about this world from prior to the show in order to understand the journey that we're about to go on? So like Dear White People would be an example of a backstory, right? They give us the backstory of the blackface party so that now at the beginning of the journey, as we start the journey at the top of Act 1, we can now understand what exactly it is that we're focused on over the course of this episode and maybe future episodes. But in particular, this episode is going to be about the blackface party, but we're not showing an episode in which the blackface party happens. We're establishing that the blackface party happened in the past, and now moving forward, this episode will be about the reaction to that party, right? So the backstory is the party happened. The episode becomes about responding to that party within the Black community at this highly white, highly racist Ivy League college. So that's backstory. That's an example of backstory. What do we need to know about this world from before in order to begin going on this journey? We also have flash forwards, an example of flash forwards. Flash forward means we're going to show where this story is headed in the future, right? Sometimes we're going to drop us into a really intense or interesting sequence from the future to say, okay, we're going to get to this point by the time the episode is complete. Now let's jump back in time to the beginning of this story and see it unfold, right? So we flash forward in the first scene of Atlanta to when Paperboy pulls a gun on this stranger that he's in an altercation with, right? We flash forward to that moment in the future. We start at this moment in the future where something really intense happens in Atlanta. And now we cut back to the beginning of the journey that will ultimately lead up to that sequence. So we show the gunshot, and then we cut back and we say however long it is, a week or I think it's something like a week earlier. And now we begin the journey of Earn attempting to win the trust of his cousin Al so he can become the manager, which will ultimately culminate in that sequence in the parking lot where the gun is drawn. That's a flash forward example. So we have backstories. What do we need to know about the past? Flash forwards, where are we headed in the future? We also have character introductions, right? So a character introduction opening, a character introduction, a cold open is going to be one in which we are really exposed to who this character is that we're about to go on a journey with, right? So Rami is an example, the Rami one that we're looking at here. Rami Hassan attends mosque where he is made to feel like he is not Muslim enough. And then in the very first scene of Act 1, he's going to break up with his white girlfriend because he's too Muslim. And that becomes a reflection of what this show is, about a guy who is balancing these two disparate parts to his identity. We're going to see both on display. He goes to a mosque and is told that he's not Muslim enough. He does something secular with his white girlfriend and is told that he's too Muslim, right? So now we're introduced to this character. Insecure was another example of one in which we are introduced to the character, right? She stands in front of a group of middle schoolers or however old they are and gives a speech about essentially who she is. They're pestering her about why she talks too white and why her hair is the way that she is. And finally she explodes and says, this is who I am. I'm a 29-year-old with a degree. I work in nonprofit. I've got a boyfriend of 5 years, yada, 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 yada. And so as a result of that, we've now been introduced to this character of Issa, right? Character introduction. Introduce us to the person who is at the center of our world, right? And then world introduction. World introduction is to introduce us to the world where we're going to be hanging out, right? This is almost always going to be in sitcoms, like Fresh Off the Boat introduces us to the world of Orlando in 1994. Right off the bat, he's looking out the window, right, at the top of Act 1, and we see Elian Gonzalez and the boy band movement and yada, 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 exploding from the past, which for them is their present, right outside of his window. He watches it all unfold, and now we've been introduced to the world of the show, Orlando 1994. Community introduces us to the world of this community college. This is the type of people who would attend this community college, right? We've been introduced to their world. Introduce the show. You figure out what show it is that you are telling us and what is most important to have the audience understand as the result of your first sequence. So if this is a show about a world, then you're going to introduce us to the world. If this is a show specifically about a character, you're going to introduce us to that character. If this is a show in which something really epic is going to happen in the future, and by the future we will understand the essence of the show, then you're going to give us a flash forward moment. You're going to show us where we're eventually headed once this show becomes whatever it truly is. If it's backstory, you're going to say we're about to go on a journey that has an epic beginning before it, but we're not necessarily telling the story of that epic beginning. We just want to introduce it at the top so that you understand what we are reacting to as we move forward. So that's that first beat. Rami Hassan attends mosque. Rami Hassan attends mosque where he's made to feel like he is not Muslim enough. We are introduced to the character. We are introduced to the show. The title of the show is Rami. We've been introduced to Rami, and then it appears across the screen, in the form of our title. So that's the introduce the show beat. Introduce the show. The second beat is going to be something new. So each of these 10 sentences, which will form a 3-paragraph outline of your pilot episode, are really important sentences. The something new beat is Rami and his white girlfriend break up because he is too Muslim. We talked about this one earlier. Why is your story starting now? You're going to activate that in this particular beat. The story is starting now because Rami and his white girlfriend break up because he's too Muslim after he was made to feel like he's not Muslim enough in the introduce the show beat at mosque, right? So now what's happening is Rami says, okay, I'm not being respected by the secular world. I know for a fact that I would rather stick with my family than this white girlfriend. So now he starts thinking to himself, okay, maybe it's time for a little change in my life. Maybe it's time for me to shake things up in my existence. This is clearly not working, right? So that's when we get to the episodic plot. What is this episode going to be about? We establish in the something new why the journey is beginning now, and in the episodic plot, we're going to focus on what is this particular episode going to be focused on. So in this case, After Rami and his white girlfriend break up because he's too Muslim, Rami decides that it's time to date his first Muslim woman. He's never dated a Muslim woman before. So now this episode is going to be about Rami's pursuit of love. They're all going to be about Rami's pursuit of love and self. In this case, he's pursuing love and self through the dating of his first Muslim woman. That's the episodic plot. Every episode is part of a larger saga, but it also needs to be a single standalone story. The first journey needs to perfectly reflect your log line. If this is the beginning of a journey, then your pilot plot will reflect that newness. If this is a pre-existing world, you'll show us a perfect example of a day in this world, right? So yeah, let's use like an example. Let's use a made-up example, a New York Times example. We'll say, okay, so we'll say in the cold open, I'm going to get a phone call that I've received my dream job at the New York Times. So that's going to be the introduce the show. This is going to be a show about me beginning my dream life as a reporter for the New York Times. So introduce the show, I get this phone call, I'm going to start this journey with the New York Times. So now the something new is going to be me arriving for my first day at the New York Times. That's what's new about this. I've received a job, now I'm entering into the job. The something new is that I've started my job at the New York Times. So then the episodic plot is going to be me receiving the first story, right? It's me receiving the first story, my first story assignment, and now that's what the episode is about. Me attempting to make my way in this New York Times world, trying my damnedest to be the best reporter that they've ever seen on my very first crack, right? So that's the episodic plot. Now, let's say that I already worked at the New York Times. This was a show in which I had been working at the New York Times for 5 years. Now, what we'll say is, in the cold open, we'll just show the kind of hijinks that happen at the New York Times, right? We'll show some encounter between me and a rival coworker, right? Just some encounter with me and a rival coworker that shows, okay, yes, we're all in this together, but it's also a competitive work environment. That's what we're establishing about the New York Times in our Introduce the Show. We're introducing the world of the New York Times. So now in the something new, because I've worked at the New York Times all along, I'm going to receive a story. I receive my story that's going to mark the beginning of this particular episode. And in the episodic plot now, I'm going to find out that my rival is also working on the story. And this episode is going to be about the conflict between the two of us to break the story. So in this case, the episodic plot is launching the conflict. In the other version, where I've just started at the New York Times, the episodic plot is introducing us to the type of stories that we're going to be telling on a weekly basis, namely me attempting crack stories. So yeah, that's the difference between sort of like a sitcom version and a coming of age version. In one version, we are just inserting us into a sitcom-y type world and showing the type of hijinks. And in the other, we are inserting ourselves into the beginning of a coming of age journey and showing the beginning, the auspicious beginning to that attempt to become the world's greatest journalist, that kind of thing. So that's the episodic plot. Those are the 3 beats of Act 1. You introduce the show, you introduce the essence of the show, you introduce the something new, why it is starting now, and you introduce the episodic plot. What is this particular episode going to be focused on? That's what Act 1 is all about. Introduce the show, introduce something new, introduce the episodic plot. The episodic plot is just what this individual episode is going to be focused on story-wise. Let's do Act 2. Act 2 is really simple. Act 2 is really just telling a good story, right? And the first beat is a strong start. Rami asks his parents to set him up on a date. What is our first step towards success? It's often just a plan that could work out. It's specific, but it's not detailed. Rami asks his parents to help him set him up on a date with a Muslim woman, right? So that's why do we think this is going to work? Because Rami wants to date a Muslim woman and his parents can help him with that. This plan could make this plan happen. It's a good, strong start. But now what we're going to encounter is the first obstacle. Rami's date is stifled by the presence of a chaperone. So something's going to get in the way of this success, right? So he got a date with this a Muslim woman that his parents set him up with. It seems like this thing could work out. But then when he arrives for this date, she's also present with a chaperone. And now all of a sudden it's like, okay, how are we actually going to have a date in which we really get to know each other? Because this other person is present as well. And he's sort of dominating the conversation. So Rami asks his parents to set him up on a date. Strong start. First obstacle is that Rami's date is stifled by the presence of a chaperone. Then from there, the new plan. So now we have two choices in a new plan. We can either come up with a plan B, or we can double down on plan A. We can find a clever way around our obstacle, or we can charge right through it. Mountain, get out of my way. Anybody who here is, raise your hand if you've heard of Montel Williams. If you've heard of Montel Williams. The name of Montel Williams' autobiography is Mountain, Get Out of My Way. His idea is that if something stands in your way, if something tells you no, if something says you can't do it, then you push that thing right out of the way. You don't find a way to circumnavigate it. You just say, screw you, thing that told me no. I'm plowing through you, right? Well, most of you seem to know Montel Williams. I wasn't sure if he was, I don't know how old any of you are, but I wasn't sure if he lingered in the 90s or if he was still known. I went to see a few episodes of his show back when I lived in New York in the 90s. He made a big impression on me, Montel Williams. So yeah, he says, Mountain, get out of my way. In this case, Rami and his date ditch the chaperone so they can get to know each other. They find a way to circumnavigate. They send the date off to hang out with Rami's quote unquote friends, coworkers from work, right? And so now the chaperone is gone, and this gives Rami and his date a chance to really get to know each other, and they have a nice little encounter. We're going to lower the hands on Montel Williams, so we don't need to discuss him any longer, but I'm glad that he made such an impression on all of you as well. So Rami and his date, what they say is like, okay, let's figure out a way to get rid of Montel Williams. Let's figure out a way to get rid of the chaperone so that we can really get to know each other. They find a way to trick him into going off to this club with their friends. And now from here, where are we at? Well, Rami and his date go off, and they really get to know each other, and they recognize just how much they have in common as second generation immigrants from this shared world, who are having a very similar experience because of some generational difficulties that they're having with the members of their community who are older. So what happens is the two of them have a nice little encounter. It turns kind of physical, but then we hit our dead end moment when Rami freaks out because his date wants to have sex, which conflicts with his idea of what a proper Muslim woman is. That Rami wants to have sex as well, but he doesn't want to have sex with her because that is his connection to his spiritual side. He expects her to be reflective of everything that he believes about what it means to be a good Muslim, while he expects himself to be everything that he expects to be fun about an American, right? That's the conflict in their lives. That's the conflict in his life. So he freaks out on her when she wants to have sex. This is our dead end beat. We reach the end of the road, an obstacle that cannot be circumnavigated. We must face the music. It's often going to be a rock bottom moment, but one way or another, we can go no further without resolving the conflict, for better or for worse. For better or for worse, we have to figure out this particular situation. And so what we have here is Rami freaks out when his date wants to have sex, conflicting with his idea of a proper Muslim woman. So the two of them have to hash that thing out. The two of them have to have that conversation. We can go no further without concluding this problem, without concluding this episode. End of Act 2, because we've told the story in Act 2. In Act 1, we introduced the story. In Act 2, we told the story. In Act 3, we're going to conclude the story. We're going to conclude the story in Act 3. So let's scroll down a little bit more, Kate, if you don't mind. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you very much. So Act 3, Rami's date ends badly when he's called out for his hypocrisy. It's a win-lose-or-draw moment. In this case, it's a loss, right? But we're talking about a small win, a small loss, or a small draw. While we need some conclusion to the story, we also need to be cognizant of the fact that the story will continue on. So we're looking for a small win, a small loss, or a draw. Something that will end this chapter, but clearly doesn't end the book, right? So let's say that this was like a competition. Let's say this was a singing competition that all, however many of us are here, 200 and some odd of us are here, 239 of us are in this singing competition. We're all part of a singing competition that's gone off to regionals, right? And so we win the competition at regionals. We've won our regional singing competition, but that's not the end of it. That just means that there's a long road ahead to get to nationals, and that's the end game of this series, right? So we had a small win at regionals that's going to set up a long journey ahead to nationals. Or maybe we lose. Maybe we lose at regionals, but that's okay because we're going to have every opportunity to redeem ourselves when we finally make it to nationals down the line. A small loss, a small win, or a draw. Maybe us and our rivals both got disqualified for fighting at regionals, but that's okay because we're going to settle this once and for all when we get to nationals, right? So the goal is to get to nationals by the end. Regionals is this particular episode, and what we're going to focus on is a small win, a small loss, or a draw that will set up the journey ahead to get to nationals. A draw is going to be the most common resolution because it's clearly inconclusive and it often feels most satisfying. Draws will usually take the form of compromise, but sometimes it can mean dissolved conflict where the resolution can't be achieved, but it doesn't end the relationship. So like we watched the Carmichael show this week, right? We get to the end of Act 2 and Gerard reveals that Bobby and Nikisha got divorced and Gerard and Maxine are living together in sin, and the mother is furious and she storms off to the kitchen and she says, you're nasty, you are all nasty, right? And when we come back at the top of Act 3, we don't even discuss what happened. We don't discuss divorce. We don't discuss living in sin. We don't discuss that anyone is nasty. Everybody's wearing Snuggies and they're watching television together. Is she going to stop being Gerard and Bobby's mother because they did something she disagrees with? No. Are they going to change their lifestyles because their mother disagrees? No. They're going to remain a family despite all of this. Sometimes we cannot resolve conflict in a way that feels satisfying, so we dissolve it instead. But if at all possible, you come up with a nice compromise that allows you to resolve your conflict. Everybody gets a little something, everybody gives a little something. That's the ideal sort of compromise. So that's what we're looking for with win, lose, or draw. We're looking for some moment that will conclude this particular journey, but not conclude the long journey that is our series. Rami's date ends badly when he's called out for his hypocrisy. The date is over. This will not be the Muslim love of his life. He's got a lot to think about moving forward. What does he learn from this experience? He realizes he has no idea what he's doing with his life. This has become clear, right? Prior to this, he thought he was living this balanced existence of somebody who's attempting to adhere to the Muslim faith and also attempting to have everything that he wants out of his secular existence. But now he realizes that he's not actually headed in any direction. He's spinning around in circles, accomplishing nothing, right? That's the lesson learned. What is the lesson learned? Lesson learned is a moment of realization. In low concept, our characters are going to learn something about themselves. Rami learns that he has no idea what he is doing with his life. In high concept, they're going to learn something about the story itself. The goal is to say, okay, I've learned this about Will Byers, I think that's his name, about Will on Stranger Things that will compel us moving forward in this story. We're not learning something about ourselves, we're learning something about the story in high concept because high concept is driven by story. We're learning something about ourselves in low concept because low concept is driven by characters and their evolution and their growth, right? So this is a coming of age story about Rami. So what we're going to have is a coming of age life lesson for Rami. So that's what we learn. We learn that the woman over the course of this episode is not going to be the mother of Rami's children, is not going to be his future wife. They've had a little fallout, but it's going to set up a journey moving forward in which Rami actually does learn to balance the disparate parts to his existence. He does learn to balance his Muslim side and his American side. Currently, the two feel like they're existing separately and simultaneously. The goal of this series is to combine those two into one sort of character trait that reflects both of them, that makes up this person, Rami. Currently, he's two halves of Rami. His goal is to combine those two halves into one person that reflects both sides to his existence. The lesson isn't always going to be so profound. Sometimes the lesson is going to be, especially in a sitcom, they can even learn the wrong lesson. Like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I would never show the pilot of that because it has so many problematic elements to it. But it's an example of, in the pilot episode, the gang sort of says to themselves, we should change the bar to drum up more business. And by the end of the episode, they realize change is bad. Let's go back to the way things were prior to this, right? So they are discovering, I wish we wouldn't change. Sure, that works too. Is it my favorite kind of lesson learned? No, it's my least favorite kind, but it works in a sitcom. It works in a sitcom where we're not expecting change. Eastbound and Down, or some of these other very problematic redemption sort of journeys, have characters frequently learning the wrong lesson. Your character doesn't have to learn a great lesson. Your character just has to learn something that will propel the story moving forward, whether it's the right lesson or the wrong lesson. So yeah, that's the lesson learned. And then from here, Rami consults a mosque elder who tells him to trust that God will deliver him to his rightful path, and also to stop masturbating so much. Once again, we're focused on both the secular side to Rami and the religious side to Rami, right? God will deliver you to your rightful path, but also stop masturbating so much. Stop treating your body like it is this completely spiritless temple, right? Stop just doing what feels good and start doing what feels right. Start doing what feels like it is a reflection of your purpose. That's what we mean by God. Now, it doesn't matter to me how you feel about the concept of God. What we're saying here is that you are given a divine purpose in this existence. Pay closer attention to that than just what your body wants on a moment by moment basis. And that's what this journey really is moving forward. Rami learning to balance these two sides to his existence. That's the story continues. We get to the end of this pilot episode, and what we say is, okay, the journey of Rami's self-discovery of his coming of age is not complete. I'm interested to watch it moving forward. I've seen some people pop up in the chat saying, wow, I need to check out this show, right? It's still a sitcom. It's still fun. It's still a silly show about a person who's figuring it out. But there's a depth to this show. And combined with that depth is also some secular silliness. There's some opportunity for laughs, but we aren't just laughing at problems that feel insignificant. This is the truest stuff these are the greatest burdens that affect any of us, is finding that balance between our spirituality and our secular existence, finding that balance between saving the world as part of the movement and also paying your individual rent, right? These are the balances that we have to find in our life, how to be part of society, how to be part of the community, and also how to be individually ourselves. And that's the journey of the story. As the story continues, that is the journey of Rami. The story continues. So those are the major beats. Those are the 10 major beats that make up your show. We start out by introducing the series. Then we introduce what is new. Why is it starting now? Then we introduce what this particular journey is about. Then we'll have four beats in a row. They're going to focus just on this individual episode of our show, this individual journey, this individual leg of the journey. And then we're going to have these 3 beats at the end that conclude this particular story, learn a lesson as the result of it, and continue the story in perpetuity. Now, it's entirely possible that you can learn the lesson before the win, lose, or draw. That works too. Don't necessarily worry about the order of the Act 3 beats, other than to say that the story continues is going to launch it in perpetuity at the very end. But the point is, these are the 10 things. These are the 10 sentences that must be accomplished as you map out the 3 acts to your series. It's not overly complicated. Introduce your story in three major beats. Tell your story in 4 major beats. Conclude your story in 3 major beats. 10 simple sentences that tell us everything that we need to know about your story. Sometimes people will raise their hand and say, like, what if I need more sentences than those 10 sentences? Then your story is too complicated. Television is not about the complicated story. It's about building complexity over time. Tell us a simple story that we can imbue with complexity as we get to know these people over time. Just like all of the friendships in your life, right? You get to know somebody and they've got like this one thing in common, and you say, oh, you know what, I kind of enjoy you. You seem like you have a similar worldview to mine, and we like the same things. And over time, you get to know this person in all their glorious depth. The same thing is going to happen on television. Give us an entire season before you really get to know these people. Give us an entire season before you've told us lengthy stories involving them. For the sake of the pilot episode, introduce us to their essence and show us one simple journey that they go on. Atlanta is about as complex of a show as exists, and yet when we were describing the pilot episode, it sounds a lot like Entourage, which is about the simplest show that's ever existed, right? That's our focus. Create something that can become complex over time when we spend some time with it. But for right now, just give us something that is simple enough that we can wrap our heads around it. That's a general outline for you. And I'm not going to lie, I'm pretty impressed with the way that I expressed that. There was some of that nobody else on the planet has ever heard before. I made some of that stuff, not made it up, but I definitely came up with some ideas while I was speaking. Kate has seen and heard this countless times. And I bet there was even a little bit of new for her. Am I wrong, Kate? A few of those things were off the cuff, were they not?
It was great.
Very nice. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks, everybody. I'm seeing a lot of things pop up in the chat. They're suggesting to me that you're getting all of this, and I don't have any doubt that you will. This was not designed for what I call my class anti-Harvard. I didn't take any classes in this. I've never read any books in this. I watched a lot of TV because I didn't have a lot of friends, and I learned this crap, and you can do the same. And we're going to talk to you like you are human beings, not like people that were expected to have a $100,000 education in television. I don't have it. You don't need it. And I think that's what's really important. I think it's something we're going to talk about a little bit later. Education is privilege because knowledge is power. And now you've got some of this knowledge, and you're going to get a little bit more of it. And then you're going to take that power, and you're going to do powerful things with it. You're going to do great things with it. How? I get really excited about this stuff, and I like that you're getting excited about it too. Thank you. I will work. Okay, let's keep talking. Let's keep talking. There's a lot of good responses here. Katie, you seen all these great responses?
Absolutely.
They're liking what we're giving. They're liking what we're giving that. Great. Well, I'm excited. Let's talk a little bit more. We're going to talk about one more. We're going to talk about a couple of things really quickly here, and then we're going to go to our lunch break. Those of you who are on the West Coast, it's a lunch break, and if it's 3 p.m., wherever it is that you are, I apologize that you have to take a lengthy break at a probably semi-inconvenient time, but those of us on the West Coast, I think, will appreciate a little bit of a snack, and the rest of you can take 45 minutes to really process the things that we've been discussing. Maybe you'll jot down some of your own ideas, right? Or somebody just said they eat lunch at 3, so what am I doing judging people based on when they consume their meals? What a silly thing for me to even think. You eat whenever you want to eat. You do whatever you want to do. Great. Let's talk a little bit more. We're gonna wrap up by Kate. Just on your end, I know you have another thing in between 12 and what time do you need to be out of here?
We don't have that today. It's happening tomorrow, so we're good.
Good. Sorry to put your business on display there. I just got nervous for a second that I was screwing you.
Oh, good.
Good. Okay, right. So let's talk about the next phase in our outlining, right? So we talked about there are 3 phases to our outlining process. There are general outlines, there are step outlines, and there are detailed outlines. We've talked about general outlines, and now we're going to talk about the step outline. So the step outline. Once the major beats of your pilot are in place, we move on to the step outline, filling in the gaps between those major beats with a scenic route. Think of a scenic route like this was a road trip, right? We're driving up to the Bay Area. We're driving to San Francisco from Los Angeles, and we need to choose a route. We could take the 5. The 5 freeway is the fastest freeway, albeit not very exciting. The 5 freeway, for those of you who are in different parts of the country, is a very quick jaunt from Los Angeles to San Francisco that takes you through nothing but cow country and bare fields. There's nothing interesting or exciting to note. There's nowhere to stop, but it will get you there the quickest. So that's the first option. We could get there the absolute quickest, right? But we could also take the 1 freeway. Now the 1 highway is also called the Pacific Coast Highway, right? The Pacific Coast Highway is going to take us a few extra hours to get there, but it's going to be a few extra hours of really cool, interesting shit along the way. The fact that it's longer is an added bonus because it means more cool stuff, right? We don't want to take the path of least resistance in the story. You want to get your characters into and out of trouble however you see fit. Now, there are a few different ways that you can be scenic. There are a few different ways that you can take us on a real journey, right? There's the active journey that explores the universe of your show. So like you remember from when we were talking a little bit earlier, the universe of your show is everywhere your characters could get to without it seeming out of the way, right? So we're going to use Atlanta as our example, right? An active journey exploring the universe of Atlanta, which is what this show is about, Atlanta, right? Ern goes looking for his cousin Al throughout Atlanta, and when he finally catches up to him, he asks to be Paperboy's manager, right? But he's told no because he's not tough enough. So he says to himself, okay, I'm not tough enough, but what I am is connected in the white world. So now he's forced to meet up with this gross, privileged, racist preppy from his college who rejects his plea for help getting Paperboy's track on the air, right? And in doing so, he makes him feel like Ern doesn't belong in this world either, but Ern's smart, right? And if no one's going to let him in the front door, he'll literally go in through the back door. So what does he do? He befriends a janitor at the station and connives his way into the building, where he then slides Paperboy's track under the door to the DJ and ice grills that racist preppy as he's heading out, right? That's a scenic route. It's not an easy yes. He could walk up to Paperboy and say, I'd like to be your manager, and hear the words yes. And now there's no scenic route journey, right? Or he could walk up to Paperboy and say, I'd like to be your manager, and hear no, and just hear, okay, well, I didn't get the job. I have to go along on my merry way. No, he doesn't do either. Instead, he finds a way to turn that no into a yes by taking a scenic route. You can take a scenic route from no to yes over the course of our Act 2 episode. Another way that we can go on a scenic journey is the way that they do on the Carmichael Show, which is to say that they very rarely leave the confines of their own homes, but yet we still have a really scenic route in conversation and debate, right? The Carmichael Show was a show that explored themes like politics, race, religion. So they went on a scenic route of those themes in conversation debate. Gerard and his girlfriend Maxine move in together, and Gerard is afraid to tell his parents. So in the episode, Maxine announces that she plans on telling them for him, and Gerard informs Maxine back that he's going to do everything in his power to stop her. So they debate about voter politics, which leads to a debate about prayer in schools, which leads to a debate about premarital sex, which leads to a fight between the parents, which leads to an argument between Gerard and Maxine, which leads them back to the parents' house for one last family fight about divorce before finally revealing that what Maxine came there to reveal hours and hours earlier. Just as much of a scenic route, despite the fact that we're really just bouncing back and forth between two living rooms, right? But it's still really scenic. This journey all takes place in conversation and debate. You can also have emotional scenic routes, right? Where our character goes through a journey of emotional evolution, right? Where our character starts out very angry, the 5 stages of grief, right? Where our character starts out very angry, and then and then from there, our character has, I can't think of the 5 stages of grief. Kate, do you remember what the second one is? I can just look this up.
No.
Anger, depression, bargaining, something, and acceptance. Anyway, denial. Thank you. Someone just chimed in. Yeah. So we start out with denial or anger. It doesn't matter. We start out with denial, and then we become angry, and then we become depressed, and then we start bargaining, and then finally we achieve acceptance. You can have an emotional scenic route of a person working through their feelings on the way to acceptance. There are any number of ways that you can take us on scenic routes. It can be all internal. It can be all conversational. It can be an exploration of our entire universe. It can be a combination of any of these three. The point is, take us on an epic journey involving your characters. Take us on an epic journey throughout whatever is going to be the important components of your world, and show us just what kind of conflict will be on display over the course of this series. So that's the step outline for you. Step outlines, it's not meant to be overly complicated. Once you have a general outline, you're going to fill in the gaps between those with a nice scenic route between these major beats. Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about subplots right now before we move on to the detailed outline. Subplots. Let's talk about subplots for a quick second. Now, the sub in subplot. Actually, let's go into the chat real quick and see if anybody knows what the sub in subplot is short for. Anybody know what sub in subplot is short for? There are a lot of chats in here. I got down to the bottom. Sub in subplot. Anybody got a guess? Some good guesses. A lot of subtext so far. No, it's not subtext, but that is a good guess. We just got one. Who got it right? Shamara Hernandez. Congratulate yourself. Subordinate. Subordinate is correct. Very good. Hoping I pronounced your name correctly. Shamara, you got it right. The correct answer is subordinate plot, which literally means that it's lower in order. But for our purposes, we're going to say that subplot means that the B plot, the C plot work for the A plot. They fill in the parts of the story that the main plot can't get to. Think of it like a balanced meal. You don't choose arbitrarily. You select an entree and build a meal around it by selecting the appropriate side. So if your A plot is a protein, your B plot is going to be a starch, your C plot is going to be a veggie. When you're putting together a meal, you want those three parts to go well together while filling in different individual roles, right? So if we're going to say our A plot is a steak, then we're going to say our B plot is mashed potatoes and our C plot is corn, for instance, right? Because it's not going to cover the protein in the steak with corn, and the starch, the potato starch is going to provide the carbs that nothing else in this meal is going to provide, right? So these three components go nicely together, despite the fact that they provide different components to the meal. That's what you're looking for with your plots and your subplots. You want to create three plots that go really well together while not necessarily covering the same themes, while not necessarily covering the same part of your story. When you put it all together, it'll equal out to a nicely balanced meal. It'll, as opposed to feeling like an A plot, a B plot, and a C plot, it'll feel like a combined meal that hits you with all those nutrients. So yeah, when you're coming up with your subplots, ask yourself what parts of the story are missing, be it characters, be it locations, be it storylines, and go from there. We provide some info on how to execute subplots in the packet, which I think you'll find simplifying. We'll go over those later. We're going to show you everything in that packet. We'll unpack that swag bag for you once and for all. It'll be like Christmas morning up in here. We're all very excited. So yeah. That's the step outline for you. The general outline tells it in major beats. The step outline is going to tell it scene by scene by scene. Simple scenes, right? And then once we conclude our simple scenes, now we're into the detailed outline. Now we're going to get into detailed scenes. And there really isn't a lot of nuance to this part of the process. You're simply going to write out what happens in the scene before you script it. A huge misconception about screenwriting is that the scripting is the creative part. No. This is the creative part. The writing stage should be constructive. You're putting together the pieces of your creation and bringing it to life with dialogue. If you're well prepared, writing the script will feel like you are telling your favorite story rather than making it up. Yeah, but you gotta be well prepared. You gotta be well prepared to tell that story by outlining it in all of its glorious detail. If you say to yourself, I'll figure it out eventually, nah, you actually won't. And that is often the problem with our high concept series. You think about a show like Lost, for instance, right? Lost planned 5 of 6 seasons. I think that's what it was. Either 4 or 5 seasons or 5 of 6 seasons. They did not have an ending. They said, we'll figure it out when we get there. And now the most popular 60-minute ensemble of all time, high concept ensemble of all time, has become a show that virtually no one will recommend to you. That's the hard thing about high concept. You got to know how it begins and ends by the very end. And if you don't, you are taking us on a show of unknown destination, and we will know that you're lost because of Lost. Game of Thrones is another example. They didn't figure out how to end it, and so when they did end it, it was unsatisfying to an audience that was totally on board, and once again, you find almost no one who recommends that show moving forward. That's the struggle with high concept. We have to know everything about that journey as writers before we even begin that journey. The beauty of low concept is that, like our lives, they will become what they become. Who was planning for a pandemic 1 year ago? No, we were all in this place where we had 5-year and 10-year plans, right? No, now I'm planning 1 week in advance because that's all you can give us. In low concept, you're just giving us a bunch of short stories that will equal out to a long story. High concept is one really long story, and you got to know exactly how it's going to unfold, or you got nothing. So yeah, those are the 3 phases to the outlining process. I'm hesitant to do questions now because I do think we should go to lunch sooner rather than later. And my guess is that there are going to be a lot of questions when I open it up again. So we may just hold our questions for the Q&A at the end and do it that way. Let me look at the Q&A and see. Kate, do you feel like you could pick out some questions that are specific to what we already, we've just been talking about, or do you think we should wait until later? I'm gonna use your discretion.
Maybe my instinct is maybe that we go to break now, and I can pick out a couple to start with when we get back that are related to what we've just talked about.
I love that idea. Great. So it is 12:10 now in my world. It's sometime 10 in your world. Wherever you are. do the proper math yourselves. And we're going to get started. We're going to be started by 1 p.m. We're going to be started in 50 minutes. I would like to get started in 45 minutes, but we are going to take the full time necessary to get some lunch in, to properly satiate ourselves. And let's say in 45 minutes. Let's say at 12:55 we're going to be beginning again, I'll be back a little bit sooner than that, and Kate and I will pick out some questions and we'll go over those really quickly, and then we'll jump into the next stage. And I did set aside quite a bit of time for Q&A because historically there are tons of questions in these seminars, so we'll have plenty of time for that. There isn't a ton more content to go over. Mostly we'll just do some talking. So let's be back by 12:55. We'll get rolling and we'll do some more of this. Hopefully everybody's having a good time so far. Hopefully everybody's picking this stuff up. I'm trying to talk to you like the intelligent human beings that you are. Try not to talk down to anybody, but at the same time keeping it simple enough that nobody gets overwhelmed. I hope we're having success with that. I like you, and I hope that you like me. It's true. Thank you. Great. Then let's talk again in a little bit. Excellent work, everybody. We'll see you in a bit.
Okay. Bye. Sure.